Just last week, Aston Martin unveiled a car that will go down in history as one of the most beautiful cars ever made, and that is the Aston Martin Valor. Just like the 2020 one-off Aston Martin, the Victor, this is, in my opinion, one of the best modernizations of an older designs, especially the Aston Martin V8 in this case from the 70s and the 80s. It's just a fantastic design. So I can't wait to jump into Photoshop and I'll show you exactly why I think this is such a special design. But before we do that, let's have a look at this article from Motor One. I'm gonna link it down in the description if you want to go and check it out. So let's get to know this car better. So, like the limited Aston Martin Victor from 2020, the Valor looks like the iconic V8 Vantage of the 70s and the 80s for inspiration, and it looks so good, this thing, from all angles. I'm gonna talk more about the design in just a minute. You have 21-inch lightweight forged alloy honeycomb wheels, and I do think that these wheels are the same ones that you had on the 2020 Victor. The interior is no less extravagant. Aston Martin designers took the classic woolen tweed like that of the 1959 Le Mans winning DBR1 and blended it with high-tech carbon fiber. So that's another detail or reason why I think this is such a special car, because both on the exterior you do have some classic elements, specifically in the rear end graphics and the front end graphics, and that seems to have been transferred into the interior as well. So the V8 in question is a front-mounted twin turbocharged 5.2 liter unit that produces 705 horsepower and 555 pound-feet of torque. It comes with this bespoke 6-speed manual transmission. It's just an insane setup that we don't see in 2023. Aston Martin doesn't list any pricing details for the Valor. Our guess is that all 110 examples have already been sold, which is pretty much always the case when Aston Martin drops something like this. Nevertheless, the Valor kicks off production in 2023, later this year, with the first delivery scheduled to take place later this year. And I hope I will get to see this car in person at some point. But with that said, let's jump into Photoshop here and let me show you exactly what's going on with this Valor, this beautiful beast of an Aston Martin that blends modern design with old school styling. I think this is one of the best modernizations, as I said, often 70s and 80s model. This and the Dodge Challenger, those are my two favorite modernizations of taking something very classic and making it look modern. So have a look at the front end here of the new Valor. We have this shark looking face, and what I love about this design overall is that the front face looks like a muscle car. It looks almost identical in its philosophy to the 1970s Aston Martin V8 right here. Just have a look at the similarities. You can clearly see that it is taking a lot of inspiration from this design, which still had the typical Aston Martin grille here in the middle and the round headlights sitting vertically. They're not integrated up here in the fenders like we have on pretty much every single other Aston Martin. In this case, they sit like a muscle car right in the front face, and that's exactly what you have in the Valor as well. Then we have the Aston Martin grille taking up a huge space in the front end of this thing, and you also have this being in carbon fiber, looking fantastic. And overall, it's a pretty simplistic design, this Valor. We also have some very nice line flow in the hood to add some of that modern feel into this design and also create a better airflow than what we had in the 1970s. Now, looking at this side view, and just take a minute to appreciate this design, because in the front end, as I said, it's a muscle car in the front, but everything else is exotic sports car, GT cruiser with this roofline. And last but not least, have a look at this proper send-off in the rear. This is one of the most beautiful integrations of a ducktail I've ever seen, because it has this send-off, this upswing right before it ends, and it also has this big cut in the graphics, which house the taillights, and have a look at the height of the ducktail itself. It's a massive ducktail, again taking inspiration from the 70s design, adding some more line flow to the modern designs with this gorgeous shoulder line that goes here and then goes slightly up over the rear axle to create this muscle that we want to have right above the rear axle. We also have some more static features, for example this air vent right here, and you have a line in the bottom to remove some of this mass that we have in the lower section with this carbon fiber side skirt, and you have a big massive carbon fiber diffuser in the rear end. I do like the design of these 21-inch honeycomb wheels. Usually I wouldn't think that, you know, having this style of wheels onto this would suit this car, but when it's on the car like this, it looks absolutely gorgeous. And if you want, you can have this silver trim piece going around the windows. You can have this be in black. But in this case, I'm not sure if I would black that out, because I think having some sort of silver tone accents on the outside of the car, it suits an Aston Martin to kind of have that styling. So now moving on to the rear view, and I don't know which one is my favorite view of this car. I think every single angle of this car is absolutely stunning, and that goes for the rear end as well. Here you can clearly see just how big this spoiler up top is, or this ducktail is one of the biggest ones I've ever seen. And when the Victor came out in 2020, they said they were only gonna build it in one example. So it was a one-off car, and I thought that was such a huge mistake for Aston Martin to not build more of this beautiful car, and I'm really thankful that they did that here. I want to show you the taillights and the ducktail here on the 1970s V8 Volante, in this case, meaning that this is the convertible. We have very static looking taillights. These probably came from some other car of the 70s just to put them on there, but we still have this massive ducktail in the rear, and I think it's such a cool modernization of this design going into the new Valor over here. You can see that they also sort of modernize the same shape that we have in the taillights, but instead now, being 2023, we have 6 LED dots or lines like this making up the taillights, but overall they create this very rectangular shape that we still had in the 1970s. One thing that I would change here though in the rear, the only thing that I would change on the Valor are these exhaust pipes. They just look too small for me. They look like they don't suit a big V12 to have 3 tiny exhausts like this. I want to have big bazooka tailpipes, maybe not out here in the sides, but if we're gonna have them here in the middle, just make them a little bit bigger than this. But overall, this exterior design, as I said, is for me, this is not an exaggeration. This is one of the best looking cars I've ever seen in my life. That's how good this design is. Now looking at the interior, we do have the 6-speed manual right here. Other than that, it's a very simplistic looking interior with some infotainment screen up here. Nothing really going on right here on the passenger side. You can see just how clean everything is. And then we have these Aston Martin vents on the sides with the Aston Martin steering wheel, carbon fiber up top and in the bottom, with some very traditional looking buttons on the spokes of the steering wheel. Nothing too complex, and that's exactly what I want to see in a modernization of such an iconic car as the Aston Martin V8 from the 70s was. Don't overcomplicate things, and I think this interior is just right, and it definitely suits this design. Old one was also very classy and elegant and styling in its interior, and I think they brought that over into the new one. I'm glad they didn't put any wood in here, because I don't think that would suit a 2023 Aston Martin, specifically not the Valor, even though we had a bunch of wood back in the 70s, but I was also a part of the times back then to have that. Overall, my final thoughts on this Aston Martin Valor is that I'm pretty sad that they're not building more than 110. I would love to see this styling, maybe not so extravagant materials, and just bring it down to where you can mass produce this in Aston Martin standards and make this into a proper Aston Martin model that would sit at around $250,000, something like that. If they did that with this design, I'm sure it was gonna sell like crazy, just based on the connection with the 70s car.